I need to catch the 12:47 to Camden because my sister hasn't answered her phone in 3 days and her neighbour says there's a smell. That's what I kept telling myself on the platform anyway. It's easier to focus on practical things when you're standing alone at a train station after midnight and the fluorescent lights keep flickering in a pattern that's almost regular enough to be intentional. I'd been there maybe 20 minutes. The last announcement was at 12:30, something about engineering works, but the board still showed my train arriving on time. My sister Emma's like that, goes silent for weeks, and then calls me at 3 a.m. to discuss whether our childhood dog definitely loved her more than me. She's 6 years older and has always treated communication like a hobby she picks up and drops. But 3 days of nothing, plus her neighbour, Janet, lovely woman, brings Emma soup when she's sick, saying there's an odd smell coming from the flat. That got to me. The platform was completely empty. I mean, I expected it to be quiet, but this was different. Usually there's at least one other person, right? A cleaner, a security guard, someone sleeping rough in the corner. But there was no one. Just me and the pigeons, and even they seemed unusually still. I was wearing my work clothes still. I'd come straight from a late shift at the call centre. My shoes were too tight, and I'd developed a blister on my left heel that I could feel with every tiny shift of weight. Weird thing to remember, probably, but I kept noticing it. Kept shifting from foot to foot. The train pulled in at exactly 12:47. It was one of the older models, the kind with the patterned seats that look like they haven't been updated since the 90s. The doors opened with that pneumatic hiss that I've heard 1,000 times. I waited for people to get off. No one got off. I peered through the windows as the train sat there, doors open, and I couldn't see a single person inside. The lights were on. Everything looked normal. But every carriage I could see from where I stood was just empty seats. No one. I got on because what else was I going to do? Emma's neighbour had sounded genuinely worried, and the next train wasn't until 5 a.m. I stepped into the carriage, and the doors closed behind me with that same familiar hiss. The seats still had that newish upholstery smell, even though these trains aren't new. I sat down near the doors, put my bag on the seat next to me, and pulled out my phone. No signal, but that's normal in the tunnels. I had a book downloaded, some thriller I'd been meaning to finish. The train started moving. I read maybe 2 pages before I noticed the man. He was standing at the far end of my carriage, near the connecting door to the next one. I hadn't heard him come in. I hadn't heard the doors open at a stop, but there he was, tall, wearing a dark coat, facing away from me, just standing there as the train moved. His posture was odd, too straight, like someone had put a mannequin on the train and positioned it to look like it was waiting for something. I went back to my book. People are weird on night trains, I told myself. He's probably tired, spaced out. But I kept glancing up every few sentences. He didn't move. Not even the tiny movements that people make unconsciously. The weight shifts, the head turns. Nothing. After maybe 5 minutes of this, he turned around. His face was normal. I mean, he looked like a regular person. Middle-aged, needed a shave, tired eyes. But he was staring directly at me, and he didn't blink. He just stared. Then he started walking towards me, very slowly, and there was something off about the rhythm of his steps that felt wrong. They were too even somehow, like he was counting them. I grabbed my bag and moved to the next carriage. I told myself I was being ridiculous as I pushed through the connecting door. So I saw a weird guy being creepy on a night train. That happens. Doesn't mean anything. But my hands were shaking as I pulled the door closed behind me. And I hated that they were shaking, because it meant some part of me knew this wasn't normal weird. This was something else. The next carriage was full of people. I actually laughed. This short, startled sound that seemed too loud. Thank God, I thought. Normal people. People coming home from a night out, maybe. I wasn't alone with creepy staring guy. But then, I registered what I was actually seeing. There were maybe 15 people in the carriage, spread out across the seats. Every single one of them was looking straight up at the ceiling. Not casually glancing up, not checking something. Their heads were tilted all the way back, their mouths slightly open, eyes wide. Staring at the ceiling like it was the most fascinating thing they'd ever seen. No one looked at me when I walked in. "Excuse me," I said to a woman sitting in the nearest seat. Business casual clothes, probably in her 40s, handbag on her lap. "Excuse me, are you all right?" She didn't respond. She didn't even twitch. She just kept staring upward, her eyes not quite focused on anything I could see. I looked up at the ceiling myself, some instinctive response. It was just a ceiling. Standard train ceiling, scuffed white panels, a few water stains, nothing remarkable. I walked slowly down the carriage, watching them. A teenage boy with headphones around his neck, music still playing faintly. An older man in a security guard uniform. A woman who could have been my age, holding a takeaway coffee cup that was tilted at an angle that should have been spilling liquid, but apparently wasn't. All of them looking up. None of them blinking. I touched the woman's shoulder, gently, didn't want to scare her. She was warm. I could see her chest moving with breath, but she didn't react at all. It was like touching a statue that just happened to be the right temperature. I moved to the next carriage. This one had 7 people in it, and all of them were sleeping. Or at least, they had their eyes closed and were slumped in various positions against windows, seats, each other. But here's what bothered me. They were all sleeping in identical positions. Their left arm across their stomach, their right hand against their face, their head tilted towards the window. All 7 of them, like someone had arranged them that way. I stood there for what felt like a long time, just watching them breathe in perfect unison. Their chests rose and fell together, exactly synchronized. I counted, in for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds. Every person in the carriage, breathing at the exact same rhythm. "What the hell?" I whispered, and my voice sounded very small. I kept moving. The next carriage had 3 people standing at the windows, one at each set of doors. They were pressed against the glass, their palms flat against the windows, looking out into the dark tunnel. They didn't turn when I came in. I walked past them. I had to squeeze around one, a young guy in a university hoodie. And he was so still, I could hear my own breathing, but not his. I looked out the window next to him, trying to see what he was seeing. Just darkness and occasional lights from the tunnel. my reflection staring back at me, looking pale and frightened. Carriage after carriage, and each one was wrong in a different way. One had people sitting perfectly normally, except they were all facing backward, away from the direction of travel. One had a group of people standing in a circle in the middle of the aisle, holding hands, eyes closed. One had passengers who were sitting in the seats, but their hands were moving. Just their hands, fingers twitching and flexing in patterns that seemed deliberate, but meaningless. Their faces were blank. I was crying with fear by the time I reached the second to last carriage, though I hadn't noticed when I'd started. The train kept moving, never stopping, never slowing. We should have reached Camden by now, should have reached several stops, but we just kept going, through tunnels that seemed darker than they should be. This carriage had only one person in it. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, sitting in the middle of the car. She was wearing pajamas, pink ones with cartoon rabbits on them. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She was the first person who looked at me when I came in. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was very clear, very matter-of-fact. I couldn't make myself respond. My throat felt as if it was sealed shut. "It's not your train," she continued, swinging her legs slightly. "You got on by mistake. It happens sometimes, but not usually. Usually people know." "Know what?" I managed. She tilted her head, studying me. "You didn't see the colour." "What colour?" "The light above the door. Before you got on. It tells you which train it is. Yours is yellow. This one is red." She said it like she was explaining something simple to someone very slow. "Red trains don't stop. They just go." "Where?" I asked. "Where do they go?" She smiled, and it was a perfectly normal child's smile, which somehow made it worse. "Nowhere you can get off." I backed towards the connecting door, keeping my eyes on her. She just watched me, still swinging her legs. "The driver might help you," she offered. "He's in the front, but he doesn't like being disturbed." I went to the next carriage anyway, the last one, the driver's car. The door was heavier than the others, harder to open. I put my whole weight into it, and it finally gave way. The driver's compartment was empty. The train was driving itself, or being driven by something I couldn't see. The controls were moving, buttons pressing themselves, levers adjusting. Through the front window, I could see the tunnel ahead, and it seemed to go on forever, curving gently downward. We were going down. Had been for a while, I realised. The slight pressure in my ears, the feeling of descent. We were going deeper. I went back through the carriage with the little girl. She was gone. The pajamas were folded neatly on the seat where she'd been sitting. I tried every door to the outside, the emergency exits, the regular doors. None of them would open. The emergency handle just moved uselessly in my grip. The windows wouldn't break either. I found a fire extinguisher and hit one as hard as I could, and it didn't even crack. That's when I found the toilet. It was in the carriage with the standing circle of people who were still there, still holding hands. The toilet was just a normal train toilet, cramped and slightly dirty. But it had a lock. A simple bolt lock that I could control. I went inside and locked the door. I'm not sure what my logic was. Maybe that whatever was happening couldn't get me if I was in a space too small for it to fit. Maybe I just needed to be somewhere I couldn't see the other passengers. But I sat down on the closed toilet lid, pulled my knees to my chest, and decided I would just wait. I had my phone. Still no signal, but I watched the battery slowly drain as I sat there. I played a stupid matching game until I couldn't stand looking at the screen anymore. I hummed songs to myself. I counted the tiles on the floor. 47. I read the graffiti scratched into the walls. Most of it was normal stuff. Jazz was here. Call Amy for a good time. A phone number that was probably fake. But near the floor, in tiny letters that I almost missed, someone had scratched something. It read, "If you're reading this, don't leave until daylight. Real daylight, not just lights. You'll know." I waited. The train kept moving. I felt it in the general vibration through the floor, the occasional sway. Hours passed. My phone died at around what I guessed was 4 a.m. My blister hurt. I desperately needed to properly use the toilet I was sitting on, but I was terrified to stand up. Like the moment I did, something would know I was there. Eventually, I dozed off, head against the wall, and had confused dreams about Emma, about missing my stop, about trains that went in circles forever. I woke up to sunlight, real sunlight, coming under the door. The quality of it was unmistakable. That early morning colour, slightly golden, nothing like artificial light. I could hear voices outside. Normal voices. People talking about weekend plans. Someone laughing at something on their phone. I waited another few minutes, just to be sure. Then, I unlocked the door. The carriage was full of regular morning commuters. People in work clothes, people in gym gear, people staring at their phones. The circle of handholders was gone. Everything looked aggressively, wonderfully normal. No one looked at me weird when I emerged from the toilet, even though I must have looked rough. I'd been wearing the same clothes for almost 24 hours. The train pulled into Camden Town Station. The doors opened. I got off. The platform was busy with morning rush hour. The electronic board showed it was 7:32 a.m. Everything was normal. I walked up the stairs to the street, into the cold November morning, and got out my phone to call Emma. She answered on the third ring. "Jesus Christ, where have you been?" she said, sounding annoyed, but also worried. "Janet said you were supposed to come by last night. I've been calling you for hours." "My phone died," I said automatically. "Emma, are you okay? Janet said there was a smell." "Oh, that, yeah. I left some prawns in the bin and forgot to take it out before I went to stay at David's place. Janet totally overreacted. I'm fine. Are you okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine," I said. "I'll explain later. I'm just glad you're okay." We talked for a few more minutes. She invited me for breakfast, but I said I had to go home and sleep. I did go home. I did sleep for almost 12 hours. But here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. When I was sitting in that toilet, waiting, I had a lot of time to think. And I remembered something strange about when I got on that train at the platform. I'd been so focused on the empty platform, on getting to Emma, that I hadn't really looked at the train itself. But now I remembered the light above the door. That little LED indicator that shows the train's route. It had been red. I looked it up later. On the Northern Line, The route indicators are always yellow or white. They're never red. There's no red light. It's not a part of their signalling system. But I saw it. I definitely saw it, now that I let myself remember. A red light above the door, bright and steady. I got on anyway. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed on the train. If I hadn't hidden in the toilet. If I just sat in one of those carriages with the others. Maybe I would have understood what they were seeing when they looked up at the ceiling, or out at the windows, or at whatever it was they were all focused on. Sometimes I wonder if I'm supposed to go back. Because last night I was walking home from work and I passed the station. It was just after midnight. And from the street, through the station entrance, I could see a platform. I could see a train sitting there with its doors open. Above the doors, a red light was shining. And I swear, I absolutely swear, I could see someone standing on the platform. Too far away to make out clearly, but their posture was familiar. It was all too straight, too still. They seemed to be waiting. I kept walking. I'm still walking, in a sense. But I check train route maps now, obsessively. I look at the lights above every door. And I never, ever take the tube after midnight anymore. Emma thinks I'm being paranoid. She doesn't know what happened. I just told her my phone died and I stayed at a friend's place. But she's noticed I won't visit her anymore if it means taking the train late. She jokes that I've developed some kind of phobia. Maybe I have. Or maybe I'm just the only person who got off that train and remembered to be afraid. The thing is, I keep seeing them now. The passengers. Not on trains, just around. In crowds, in shops, standing at bus stops. People who look almost right, but not quite. People who hold themselves too still, or who all turn their heads at exactly the same moment, or who I catch staring upward at nothing. Yesterday, in the supermarket, I saw a woman standing in the cereal aisle. She was facing the shelves, not moving, and something about her posture made me stop. I watched her for a full minute. She didn't blink, didn't shift her weight. She just stood there, staring at the cornflakes. When I walked past her, I looked at her face. Her eyes were open, but unfocused, looking at something beyond the shelves, beyond the wall, beyond everything. I didn't say anything to her. I just kept walking, checked out, and went home. But I know what I saw. I know what it means. The train is still running. It's always running. And some people never really got off. I just hope I'm not one of them.